Imagine this for a second. Not just one child, but 15 children. Tiny figures, really, facing this incredibly violent storm. They're inside this little wooden house, right? And it's creaking, groaning. The wind's just trying to tear it right off its foundation. And these kids, they link hands. They lean into the wind, shifting their weight, literally holding the house down so it doesn't blow away. It's such a powerful image, almost mythic, isn't it? But what if I told you that wasn't just a story? That it was a real, lived moment that became a lifelong metaphor for one person's struggle, their commitment, holding down society itself against its own storms. That image, that incredible moment, it's the origin of Walking with the Wind, a memoir of the movement. The book by, well, the incomparable John Lewis, co-written with Michael Dorso. And this isn't just history, it's deeply personal, told with this mix of charm, warmth, and just searing honesty. It really pulls you in.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing this today. You see, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM, designed for, well, a deeper, more dynamic book analysis. Our goal here is to really dig out the most important insights from this essential book, kind of a shortcut, to get you well informed about John Lewis's amazing journey and the civil rights movement itself.
We're going to trace his whole path. I mean, think about it. From a sharecropper's son in rural Alabama to being this absolutely pivotal figure in the movement and then, decades as a respected congressman. It's quite a story, full of force, unexpected turns, even moments of real tenderness. So let's unpack that central metaphor first. Walking with the Wind. It's more than just a nice title, right? It comes straight from his childhood, a memory he describes so vividly. Young John, barely a teenager, with 14 other kids in his Aunt Suniva's house during this terrifying thunderstorm. The wind was so bad, the house actually started lifting off its blocks.
It's incredible, isn't it? He talks about how they just knew, without saying anything, to grab hands and move together, shifting their weight to whichever corner was lifting up. Their small weights combined, that collective action, kept the house on the ground. And what's fascinating is how he saw that simple act as a blueprint for his whole life. He got it really profoundly, that people of conscience never left the house when America faced its own storms. You stay, you link hands, you hold things together.
And his early life definitely threw storms his way. Born February 24, 1940, near Troy, Alabama, third of 10 kids, parents were sharecroppers. He saw that brutal economic exploitation up close, and it marked him. What's really startling is how young he was when he grasped how unfair this system was. Like age 6, he had this clarity. He remembers telling his parents, and this is a quote, "This is nothing but gambling. We're betting on getting ahead, but there ain't no way. We're going to lose. We're always going to lose."
At 6 years old, I mean, that's a pretty sophisticated critique of an entire economic system. It shows this innate sense of fairness or maybe injustice he had, recognizing that the cotton harvests were rigged, that the white landowners were taking their share. It wasn't abstract for him. It was real, immediate, foundational. He understood why it was rigged.
Yeah, and, those little details really make him human. Like finding comfort preaching sermons to the family chickens. Can you picture that? A little boy giving speeches to chickens, dreaming of being a midnighter. It's kind of funny, but it shows that deep spiritual side, that urge to speak truth, which totally fueled his later activism.
Absolutely. That spiritual calling connected right into his work for justice. And then came the spark, the real catalyst, hearing Martin Luther King Jr. on the radio. It was during the Montgomery bus boycott, mid-50s. That voice, that message, it was like a direct call to him. He wanted to integrate Troy State College, wrote to King, and that led to their first meeting in Montgomery. King called him the boy from Troy. Imagine hearing that. Must have felt like destiny.
So this is where things really shift for him. He moves from just aspiring to being deeply involved. Couldn't afford Morehouse, so he enrolled at American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville in '57. He could work there to pay tuition. But Nashville, it became more than just school. It was his training ground.
Nashville was absolutely crucial. He started going to these Tuesday night workshops led by the Reverend James Lawson at Clark Memorial United Methodist Church. Lewis literally said they were the focus of my life. And these weren't just talks. They were intense training sessions, philosophy and practical tactics of nonviolent direct action. They role-played facing violence, planned how to endure without fighting back. It was serious preparation, mentally and spiritually.
And it wasn't just theory, right? These workshops were the direct source, the foundation for the Nashville student movement. They launched those famous sit-in demonstrations at segregated lunch counters, February 13th, 1960, took those lessons straight into the fire.
And the book pulls no punches describing the violence they faced. It's truly harrowing. Lewis recalls this one awful incident. A group of young white men came in, and they started pulling and beating primarily the young women. They put lighted cigarettes down their backs, in their hair, on their clothes. Just imagine sitting there, taking that, staying nonviolent, the courage involved. But despite that, the Nashville movement worked. They desegregated public places there. It showed the power of that discipline.
That discipline, that almost unbelievable courage, it was tested again, even more severely maybe, in what Lewis calls his first major involvement in the formal civil rights movement, the Freedom Rides. These bus trips across state lines were designed to test the Supreme Court rulings against segregation in interstate travel, basically daring the government to enforce its own laws.
And the details he gives, they're just chilling. Constant danger. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, Lewis and two others were brutally attacked. A white police officer just stood there watching until finally stepping in. The sheer nerve of the attackers, doing it so openly. Then in Anniston, Alabama, Klansmen firebombed a bus, tried to trap the riders inside while it burned. Unbelievable.
So when the original rides were stopped because of that extreme violence, it was the Nashville group, Lewis's group, that stepped up. They decided to continue the rides, refused to let violence overcome the mission. Lewis himself, beaten unconscious, arrested multiple times, but he stayed committed. That's where his idea of good trouble really comes alive, just refusing to back down, pushing through the pain.
And that absolute commitment, facing down that kind of horror with nonviolence. It shows how deep their philosophy ran. It wasn't just a tactic for them, it was moral. And that steadfastness, it led straight to Lewis rising up. By 1963, he's just 23, and he's chairman of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, leading this really dynamic, crucial organization.
And SNCC was different, wasn't it? He spends a good bit of time in the book explaining that. Its focus on grassroots organizing, participatory democracy, not top-down leadership. It was about empowering local people, giving them a voice. That felt pretty revolutionary. Which brings us to a really interesting part of the book, maybe one people don't know as well. The 1963 March on Washington. Lewis, the youngest speaker. You'd think it was all unity and triumph. But Lewis reveals there was actually a lot of last-minute drama about his speech.
That's right, and it gives you such insight into the movement's internal workings. His original draft was, well, pretty fiery. He called the Kennedy administration's civil rights bill too little and too late. And the really controversial part, he threatened to burn Jim Crow to the ground nonviolently. The organizers got nervous, worried it would alienate politicians. They really pressured him to tone it down.
Imagine that pressure. Backstage, minutes before speaking to hundreds of thousands, he describes these tense talks with giants like King and A. Philip Randolph. They urged him to soften it. And out of respect, really deep respect, he agreed to make changes. But that tension between radical honesty and political necessity, it definitely hinted at bigger splits to come later in the movement. It's a really complex moment. Now, as we're getting into some of these really demanding, complex parts of the story, the choices and challenges Lewis faced, I just want to mention Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel. It's a great place for more AI book analysis like this, really aimed at sparking reflection and rational thought. A good spot to continue these kinds of explorations.
Okay, moving on to another incredibly powerful and, frankly, heartbreaking moment, probably the most famous section of the memoir, March 7, 1965, Bloody Sunday. Lewis co-led over 600 marchers across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. Just peaceful demonstrators trying to march for voting rights.
And they were met with just horrific planned violence. As they got to the top of the bridge, Alabama state troopers attacked. Billy clubs, whips, tear gas. Lewis describes the sounds, the impact, the gas stinging your eyes. He got a fractured skull himself. That day literally scarred him. And it was all caught on TV. The whole nation saw it. Became known as Bloody Sunday.
Those images, peaceful citizens being attacked just for wanting to vote, it absolutely shocks the country. It became a turning point. Morally, it built massive support for voting rights laws. Lewis even testified later, giving this chilling detail that the attack started just 1 minute and 5 seconds after a 2-minute warning was announced. Shows you how fast, how brutal it was.
And incredibly, that moment of terrible suffering led directly to a huge legislative win. President Lyndon Johnson was apparently deeply affected by the Selma images. He invited Lewis to Washington for the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Lewis called it the pinnacle of the civil rights movement, a result of all that sacrifice.
But, and the book is very honest about this, even that massive victory came with a personal price for Lewis. Within SNCC, he started facing criticism, seen as maybe too close to the white establishment, too willing to work with President Johnson. It was a sign of the storm brewing inside the movement itself.
Yeah, and that storm eventually broke. It led to this really painful split. Lewis talks very openly, almost sadly, about being ousted as SNCC chairman in 1966. It was a clear clash of ideologies with Stokely Carmichael and the rising Black Power movement. They rejected Lewis's unwavering commitment to nonviolence and working with white allies.
It sounds like it was a really tough time. He mentions being criticized for being too friendly with President Johnson, even mocked for promptly cleaning his suits whenever Johnson called.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a fundamental split over the future direction, the strategy. But Lewis stuck to his principles. Nonviolence was core to him, even when it cost him his leadership role. That says a lot about his character, right? Choosing conviction over power.
And he talks about how devastating that was, being pushed out by Carmichael. He says it left him at the age of 26 without employment, single, and uncertain about his future. I mean, imagine dedicating your entire youth, facing all that violence for a movement, only to be sidelined because your core beliefs didn't fit the new direction. Seeing the movement he loved drift away from nonviolence and integration, it must have been incredibly painful.
He writes about it with sadness, yeah, but not really bitterness. He seemed to understand it as part of how movements evolve, even when it hurts. But Lewis was resilient. That wasn't the end for him. It just pushed him to rebuild, find new ways to keep fighting for justice.
And he did rebuild, both personally and professionally. He married Lillian Miles in 1968. He speaks about her so warmly, the love of his life and a fellow activist. They adopted their son, John Miles, in 1976, built a new personal foundation.
And that personal rebuilding happened right alongside his move into politics, a new arena for his activism. From 1970 to 77, he was with the Voter Education Project, helped register nearly 4 million minority voters, putting the Voting Rights Act into practice. Then, Atlanta City Council, 81 to 86, focusing on things like government ethics, preserving neighborhoods, using political power within the system.
And then the big step, his 1986 run for Congress against Julian Bond, his old SNCC colleague. It was a tough race, apparently. But what's really interesting and says a lot about Lewis is that he won with a clear majority of white votes in the black majority district. That wide appeal set him up for that long, long career representing Georgia's 5th district. Decades of service.
What really comes through in the book is this whole arc of his character, from that kid questioning sharecropping to the leader facing down violence to becoming this respected figure in Congress. And he writes about himself with such honesty, admits his own stubbornness, but is also very self-critical. You don't always see that in leaders.
The themes that stick with you from the book are just so powerful. That idea of the beloved community, it's like his guiding star. He says it's not a destination, not some perfect future place, but a way of being spiritually, politically, economically, emotionally, intellectually.
And it's not passive, that beloved community. It demands action. Inclusivity, nonviolence, and the hard discipline of radical hospitality. That's a tall order. And his commitment to nonviolence, even when it cost him, required, as he put it, matching the capacity of evil to inflict suffering with an even more enduring capacity to absorb evil. That's a deep, almost spiritual take on it.
The book also does a great job exploring those generational clashes within the movement. Respecting the older leaders, but also needing to push harder, faster. It shows the arguments over strategy, over compromise. The civil rights movement wasn't one smooth thing. It was messy, alive, full of passionate people, often disagreeing.
And the impact of Walking with the Wind, well, it's huge. Critics loved it, called it destined to become a classic, praised its rare insight. It really helps solidify Lewis's status, his reputation as the conscience of Congress.
Yeah, it's definitely essential reading now, especially in schools. The detailed accounts of nonviolent tactics aren't just history. They offer real lessons for today's movements for justice. It feels like a bridge, connecting that historical fight with the challenges we still face, trying to build a better society.
So, thinking about this book today, what's the takeaway? John Lewis's journey, captured in Walking with the Wind, it really shows that fighting for justice isn't some project you finish. It's ongoing, often painful, always demanding. It takes persistence, discipline, and the courage to make that good trouble he talked about, that beloved community. It's not something handed to you. It's something you have to constantly work to build and protect, especially even after you win the big victories.
And to explore this incredible book and other deep topics further, definitely check out Mindful Moments and our podcasts. We offer more AI book analysis aimed at inspiring reflection and thoughtful discussion. Always new ideas brewing there. Don't miss out. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and please think critically.